So there's another Avatar movie that's just been released pretty recently called Fire and Ash, and there's been a heck of a lot of chatter about this one, unlike the second film, The Way of Water, that was followed by crickets here on the internet back in 2022. Regardless, the chatter has been pretty all over the place on this third film, and I can't really offer too much of my own feedback about it because I haven't seen the actual film yet, but I can discuss other people's opinions and my thoughts from the previous two films. Now first, I want to start by talking about what the actress Zoe Saldana has had to say regarding her thoughts about Neytiri, the character that she's played in all three movies. She was asked about Neytiri's journey from just tolerance to acceptance when it comes to the character Spider. And for reference, Spider is the human boy in the second film that basically grew up with the Na'vi tribe. So that was pretty much just a refresh for me as well because I completely forgot about all these characters for a bit, I'm not gonna lie.
One thing I really like about your storyline in this movie is actually Neytiri's relationship, which is kind of complicated with Spider.
Yes.
Because what is it like playing that journey out from just tolerance to acceptance for her character?
I mean, Neytiri's a full-blown racist in this movie. That's exactly, I was discussing it with Jim, and I think it was important for me to not run away from that for her. This is a woman that has experienced an extreme amount of loss at the hands of a race, of a species that she recognizes as her own, and she doesn't understand, she doesn't want to accept them, and yet she falls in love with one of them and has a family with them. So she is being challenged and her faith is being challenged. But what Neytiri must do is she must grow. She has to, because her children depend on it. Her children are her teachers, and not just her teachers, they're also Jake's teachers. And I love that Jim allowed Jake and Neytiri to recognize that, to discover the strength and courage in all of their children, and to accept when they needed to be guided by them.
So in response to the interviewer's question, Zoe basically just referred to her character as a racist. And that seemed to really set the internet on fire.
And let's face it, Neytiri's a racist.
This is the limitation of the Avatar franchise and why so many people criticize them when they release. Listen, I'm actually an advocate for white directors to explore the stories of people of color because truly I think that's the only way that this type of media can be normalized. But I also believe that an integral part of these white directors and writers telling our story is that they have to do the research and do their due diligence to cast people who have a connection to the groups that they are trying to portray. A lot of that astute storytelling is undercut by the actors that he chose to play the Na'vi. With the exception of the man who plays the water chief, every single member of the Na'vi and their roles are played by people who I don't think connects with the characters and can't fill in the gaps that James Cameron's falls short on when it comes to portraying these characters. You know what you're thinking. Zoe Saldana is black. Why can't she connect with any of these African-based cultures? This is where I enter the very difficult conversation that be kicking our asses every time about the difference between race and ethnicity. Zoe Saldana has made it very clear that she doesn't connect with African Americans and their race or with African race at all, and has done her due diligence to separate herself from that by also doing things like playing Nina Simone in blackface against her family's wishes. To call a character like Neytiri racist is not only off the mark, it is dangerous, especially in a franchise like this, which is categorically misunderstood. Neytiri is not just some woman in modern America dating a white man with all the history that comes with it. Jake Sully and the Earthlings who've come, who incidentally all happen to be white, are ruining her planet and committing genocide. Truly, I don't know how committed Jake Sully would have been had he not been disabled before he got connected with the Na'vi.
This take coming from Zoe is not particularly surprising to me. Zoe has very publicly struggled with her own racial identity and how she shows up over the years. And also, I get why people are upset, because even though Pandora is a fictional world, this type of talking point mirrors a talking point that has been levied on us by the right wing, that fighting against oppression is inherently racist. Because in this fictional world of Pandora, the Na'vi are the indigenous people. And then you have the sky people who show up, who are colonizing their land, unaliving them in mass, and stealing resources from them. It feels very reminiscent of our actual real life history.
When I saw this clip, I didn't know how to feel because technically she's not wrong. Neytiri feels an intense hatred for the Sky People due to what they have done to her. She has experienced so much loss and pain. She develops a prejudice. She's not wrong about that. But it's hard to digest when the film wants you to accept this character so badly. Not only that, you want us to accept that Awa, the supreme being, the god of this world, chooses Dr. Grace to conceive a child, a special child, and not to mention casting decisions for some native Na'vi characters. It's hard to digest.
Now, this wasn't all that surprising considering that folks really haven't been caring for her so much since her winning her Oscar for Best Actress in a crappy movie. I mean, in a supporting role for Emilia Perez. I had even talked about that in a video in the earlier half of this year because she really did not handle that well. And you could see that she was really just trying her best not to get on the director's bad side because that might mean less roles and money in her future. But here you can really see how lacking her understanding is of her own character because she's definitely a lot more multifaceted than how Zoe makes her out to be. First of all, I think this might be speciesist, if that's a thing, because human isn't a biological race, technically speaking, so there's just two different species here. But secondly, and most importantly, it's not really that she hates the humans just for the sake of hating them. She holds deep resentment for them because of all that she lost in both the first and the second films. They destroyed her home, took her father away from her, and then it happened all over again in the second movie, except this time she lost one of her sons. And now she wholeheartedly believes that these humans are just evil and ruthless. These Sky People, as they would often be called in the films, haven't really done much to prove her wrong either. Yes, you had Jake and Dr. Grace show them a little bit of kindness and try to put a stop to all the chaos and destruction in the first film, but outside of that, there hasn't really been much compassion. Just a whole lot of people coming in to take what they want for their own selfish gain, no matter the cost. Now this brings us to another part of the ongoing conversation of what some people have seen as potentially the deeper meanings and story behind the films. That being the retelling of how colonialism and various conquests impacted countries all over the globe throughout the centuries. From the continent of Africa to Asia, then also countries throughout the Caribbean, the islands of Polynesia, the list goes on and on. But it's pretty clear that in the Avatar films that they're trying to portray an indigenous group of people that literally had their planet invaded at first for their raw materials. I'm just going to say that because I can't remember how they pronounce the material that they were coming for. I think it was like Unobuntium, Botanium. I don't know how to pronounce it, okay? Y'all, yeah. They were basically coming over, invading this planet because it was worth about $20 million per kilogram back on Earth. So they sent in Jake to learn the Na'vi people's ways and also report back to them like some double agent. But then he realized that he didn't want to be that guy because he was basically lying to the people, taking advantage of their kindness because they were pretty peaceful and accepting for the most part. Except for in the beginning, of course, where Neytiri was going to take him out until she saw a sign from Awa not to do so, you know? But in the end, the trust was still betrayed. Their home was blown up for this expensive material, definitely similar to what had happened to these countries that I mentioned earlier in real life, way back when, but of course minus the dynamite and the futuristic looking weapons. But it's pretty clear that James Cameron and his team of writers had definitely borrowed from various indigenous tribes to kind of engineer the Na'vi culture. So some people are a little irritated that most of these actors playing them are white because of that. Now, me personally, much like how people handle the whole Switch era thing when it came to The Little Mermaid in terms of the main character Ariel's race, as a fellow black person, I'll say that in this situation that it didn't really bother me since it's a completely fictional and made-up story on a planet that's 4.37 light years away with a species of 10-foot blue people with tails that could connect with animals. So I don't really care who plays them or voices these characters. I honestly could care less. But regardless though, for these reasons, I could understand why some people have kind of a love-hate relationship with these movies. But overall, it looks as though the third installment of this franchise is going to do pretty well with audiences, and particularly at the box office. Because I think even though you could tell that they put a lot of effort into making these, that the money is a pretty big contributing factor to them continuing to make more, even though they took forever to make the second film, almost like they weren't sure if they should at first. But I feel like Avatar has kind of become these series of movies that people don't really care about, but they go to watch it anyway. And they go out in droves, clearly, because these movies make like $1 billion each plus, you know? So yeah, it's kind of weird, but I feel like that's the best way to explain it. It's like people don't really talk about these films afterwards, but it's like when they do come out, people still go out and watch it, you know? But I'm going to have to come back and report my thoughts after watching this, because it did unfortunately come out close to Christmas time, and that was one of the busiest weeks of this year for me. So I'll be watching it soon, but until then, I'll catch you all later.